tried to do it. Equality is still missing like an absent student. The black movement, tired of getting these to our necks. Fed up with the...
All right, yeah, well, thank y'all for coming. We're going to, like I said, kind of just keep a conversation. You know, I know lots been going on, a lot of different realms. I know yesterday I was actually at one of the protests for Elijah McClain. So I know things are still going. So I think one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask, you know, everyone kind of going on forward is, I've been hearing a lot of people question and talk about, how do you guys feel about, is this more an actual movement, something that's actually making change right now? Or do you think it's another kind of, you know, a phase where people are talking and then it's going to die out? Or do you think it's an actual movement happening right now? What up?
I mean, I think it's a movement. It's more than just like a moment in time. As a state legislator, I know that the protests have really brought change to the state capitol, which is, you know, going to affect people statewide. If we didn't have the protests, I wouldn't have the momentum to pass the bills that I passed. So before the protest started, I had a bill specifically to address what happened to Elijah McClain and Devon Bailey out in Colorado Springs. If you remember, Devon Bailey was actually shot in the back while he was running away, and the cops got off because it's called fleeing felon. And if someone resembles a felon, you can shoot them in the back. Okay? So basically, you know, law enforcement can be like the judge and executioner, like jury executioners. And that comes from slavery, right? And so I had a bill to abolish that, right? Other states have abolished that practice. We have not. So I wrote a bill to abolish that, to abolish, you know, the chokeholds and excessive force when someone's not even thought of to have committed a crime, like Elijah McClain. Like, all of that would have been illegal, and is now. But initially, when I brought that bill forward, I didn't have the support of my colleagues on the Democratic or the Republican side. And then when the protest started, I was actually at the Capitol when they started shooting. So I'm in a shootout, right? And I'm like, whatever, been there before, whatever, it's my life. But like, they brought me in, and then everyone was so worried, right? Because they're not used to it. They're not used to any of this, you know? And they were like, well, what can we do to support you? And can we bring you food? No, I want a bill. And I want you guys all to sign on to the bill before you see it, right? Like, I want it all signed on, and I need you to trust me right now that it's going to be good, you know? And to my surprise, they took me up on it. And so we got introduced Senate Bill 217 that really is like a national model for police accountability. It's called the Law Enforcement Accountability and Integrity Act. And we passed it. And so, you know, and I worked with Shania McClain to get it passed. And so, you know, I continue to be out there with the protesters, because as a legislator, I can just pass bills for future. I can't fix what happened before, and I can't bring anyone back, you know? But what I can do is try to pass laws that stop this from happening. And if it does happen, we can hold law enforcement accountable. So we're really excited about that bill. Like, you know, it's really made a difference already in Colorado. We got rid of this thing called qualified immunity, so that you can personally hold law enforcement accountable and like sue them personally in their pockets. We changed use of force standards so that they could, you know, they could be charged and convicted of murder or manslaughter or whatever it is, whatever the appropriate crime is. We took away their ability to hold weapons if they have officer misconduct, and the fact that they can't work again in the state of Colorado. And we're going to put them all in a database like they do us. So that we can all see who they are and what their misconduct was. I mean, the bill is it's pretty deep. Like, if you don't intervene and you're a law enforcement officer, you get charged with the same crime and put into that database too. So it's like, you know, it's something that is quite large, and something that, you know, I saw on Twitter, Ayanna Pressley posted just the other day, like, we I don't know what the number was, 36, 37 states have painted Black Lives Matter on their streets, but only one has passed qualified immunity. That was Colorado. So we passed that bill, you know? And so hopefully it's a model for the state, but man, like, all this, like, you know, working around the edges and stuff is BS. Like, we gotta like really hold law enforcement officers accountable. You can't give them outs. And like I told them, I'll keep working on these bills until I don't have no more Elijah McClain's and Devon Bailey's. You know what I mean?
Street signs, don't do enough.
Right. I'm not here for, you know, for that. It's great. Fine.
The symbolic gestures are cool and all, but like, what we need is like the action, like you passing that bill. I know one of the most important parts of that bill, one that really resonated with me, was the amount of time the police department can hold on to footage, to body cam footage. So on May 1st, this young man named William DuBose was killed in the parking lot of my apartment building. That happened off of West Colfax, and my fiance and I like got out of our sleep. We were waking up to gunshots, and we looked outside on the balcony, and there was like 8 officers standing over his body. So that was crazy because like if they said they found a gun on him, which it looks like he did have a gun, but
which is not illegal, by the way.
Exactly. The thing is like you have all these right-wing militia groups that march on all these capitals across the country because they don't want to wear a mask, and they're armed with AR-15s and body armor, and the police protect them. But if a black or brown man has a gun on him that is legal, that he has paperwork for, he's a target. He's automatically a target. That's just how they view us. And so, like I said, he was killed right outside my balcony. And for the longest time, leading up until the events what happened to George Floyd, I was trying to advocate for that family, trying to tell his story through social media as best as I could. And then when the George Floyd thing happened, it just sparked, obviously, this nationwide outcry. And all these cases, like Elijah McClain, like I didn't know about Elijah McClain until last month. And I live in Denver. Like it just wasn't in the news. Like I don't remember seeing it in the news. So when you say is it like a movement or is it a trend? It's definitely a movement. Like the movement has been going on for generations. Like our ancestors passed the struggle on down to each one of us. But there are factions and there are people that use it as a trend. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous because, I mean, they jump on this trend and then they forget about it. And the momentum just stops. You don't see a lot of media covering the protest anymore. They get bored with it. So it's up to us to just keep it going, just keep the momentum going, keep the pressure on the politicians, to keep the pressure on law enforcement. Yeah.
Absolutely. I just think there's so much power in just thinking about what are the different kind of vantage points that we have. So just thinking about your vantage point from looking at what is systemic change that we can do in the state, and then just being an educator, my immediate how can I make sure community is aware of their rights? Like, how can I make sure that they're also, taking down the information about these officers, and also feeling secure that they can leverage these complaints, look up officers in these databases that you've created, and just thinking about too, how does that kind of policing, right now in DPS, this, defunding school-based officers, and so just recognizing that movement, it's impacting so many systems, but we need to have people at all level of that system holding it accountable, because if not, it becomes a change that's very cosmetic, very performative, and not institutionalized change that doesn't have to live with each one of us as activists, but can live in the policies and everyone holding that ground and continuing to move forward.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think, honestly, that's why they hold on to that body camera footage for so long, because they hope that the outcry will die down before it's released, right? And so you can wait a year, 2 years, sometimes longer, before you get that body camera footage. And so then you have the momentum for the systemic change.
There's certain districts where if you have an officer involved shooting and that incident is under investigation for more than a year, that officer can no longer be prosecuted regardless of what the decision is. And so sometimes they'll hold it for, like you said, 10, 11, 12 months, and then now all of a sudden you can't charge this cop, so what's the point of even now they have the footage and they, all right, well, here's the footage. We don't have to prosecute anybody now.
Yeah, I think everything in the bill that we wrote directly related to Colorado cases. Mm-hmm. Every single thing, because that's exactly true. They will literally hold the camera footage as long as they can. Mm-hmm. If they release it right away, then you got a whole different situation. Then you got momentum, you got people hearing. And I'm talking about the entire body camera footage, not just the edited little snippets y'all want to put out to exonerate the officers. Mm-hmm. We need to know the whole story. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's how you make the systemic change. Mm-hmm. They are also doing other things when it comes to the lawsuits. Though in the lawsuits that people have, they usually ask for some type of change as well. from the departments to change policy or whatnot, and that works. But then I don't know if it sticks, you know. But when you have the law, I mean, they break policy. That's an internal problem, right? But when you break the law, like that's external now, you know. So hopefully it will make change, but like it's got to be a movement, not a moment, because this ain't it. Like we got so much more to do.
Yes. These institutions were made to endure. The fact that we are still fighting for the same things that generations before us have fought for, you know. So I agree that it's dangerous if it's just like for the aesthetic of your social media, you know what I mean? Look, I'm posting this, look, you know what I mean? But if you're not participating in any of the things that you're talking about with the policy making, the holding people accountable, and even in education, because I know in education, a lot of times parents don't know what their rights are. And that, I'm thinking about it from the realm of special ed. It's like a lot of parents be like, I trust you, you know, I know you love my kids. Can you just do what you think is best? Which is like, I appreciate that you would give me that much trust. But at the same time, we can't have that, you know? You got to be able to know what you have access to.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that allowed so many acts of institutional violence to take place, is that there's the expectation of trust, and there's this giving of trust, and there's this belief that people are acting with your best interests at heart. And that, I think, is one of the worst things that we teach children, is that to have no discernment and to have this and critical thinking around what are the things that are impacting my life and how can I, you know, prepare for that. When you think about the world we want to see, are we aligning systems to even manifest that in 100 years? Like, are we aligning our students to be able to break down all of these different, from climate change to, you know, hunger to violence? Everything is around nursing the problem,
it's almost like
right?
Kids to be subservient.
Yeah. So they're interlocking. I guess when you say like these systems were built to last, is like recognizing how interlocking these systems are, that they work with housing, they work with health, they work with mental health, they work with policing, they work with, integration after, the criminal industrial complex. So like, how are we working and making sure that our kids are being equipped, I think, to become truly able to destruct these systems and recreate new systems, have this imagination that they can imagine what the future can look like with healthcare, like what's possible, you know?
And I think that's even a big one with, I think sometimes even kind of come more alive, I feel like with, some of our generation is the mental health awareness. And, and playing, kind of even how that works now and then, where it's interesting to me because, we've had these movements before. And we've had great ones, big ones, and we've also had some that were kind of almost trendy where, more for social media and with social media, it's interesting because now even when you leave those, we're going home, and because of social media, you're still involved with that.
Yeah.
So something I've been seeing a lot of people talk about is, feeling okay with your mental health, taking care of yourself during these times too. Like, are you maybe zoning out for a little bit? Are you taking some days to just, hey, you don't have to constantly be fighting every day, every hour, and working on yourself as well. It's kind of have that balance where it's kind of intersection where it's all right, let's work on mental health, but still what we're fighting for, and how do we balance that and make it work at the same time?
Those protests take a lot of
watching these videos, watching these murders on video too.
Yeah,
I could even watch Elijah McClain. Like I think it's secondary trauma to all of us. Seeing somebody who looked like you, I feel like in Colorado, but not only that, but I feel like every murder, I'd be feeling like it's a personal connection. Like, I'd probably be cool. I'd probably sit with Breonna Taylor at the staff meeting. You know what I mean? I'd be like, dang, I feel like I know each of these people personally. And so, like, you mourn for them personally. And so it's just like watching taping after taping of the murder of black people, it's, like, traumatic for us, too. Like,
coming off the heels of, like, what happened with William DuBose, and then a few weeks later, George Floyd, seeing that video. And then a few weeks later, the Elijah McClain video came out. And I refused to watch the Elijah McClain video for weeks, and until I caught it on the news one day. And it was just one of those things like, I don't need to see that. I don't need to see that again.
It took me forever to watch George Floyd.
Right. That one was just so in your face. Like, the video came out the same day. You know what I'm saying? So it was just one of those things that, like, at first you couldn't avoid the George Floyd. but I was like going out of my way to avoid the Elijah McClain video just because I didn't want to see it. Like it activated me when the story came out. I was like, okay, gotta fight for this young man as well. But I just didn't want to see it. I just didn't want to see it. Like I believed what was being reported, his last words, all that. I heard the audio, but I just didn't want to see it, you know, because it's so draining. It's so draining. I spend 12-hour days covering these protests, and you go home and you're just physically tired. It's the heat. You're wearing these masks. It's so hot outside in the middle of the summer, and then mentally it's draining. You know, emotionally. You get home and you're after the adrenaline wears off, you're left with this like confusion and anger and sadness, and it's just like you do need to take that time to kind of reset. Like today was my day to reset. Like I needed to after a long weekend of like being out there protesting, covering it. Because I'm not even coming from it. When I do my photography, I'm not doing it just from a photojournalistic standpoint. I'm like out there trying to tell the stories because I believe in the fight. I believe in the cause. I'm not like a photographer from 9 News that this is like my job, and I'm just getting paid to cover these with no opinion at all. Or you know, there's obviously always some bias, but I'm out there like fighting for our people. You know what I'm saying? So
I think it's interesting because if you tie so when I was growing up, right, my parents would talk about mass incarceration. I went to school, they talked about mass incarceration, prison industrial complex, you know what I mean? Like we had folks like Common and like most like talking about it, you know what I mean? And so like it wasn't a question, like we are not out there questioning our own people right now, you know what I mean? Like we're like, no, this is real, and we can start talking about systemic change, which wasn't something that folks were really talking about as a collective voice that long, you know, back in the day, right? But so now it's like, well, we're working on these issues, and I do feel like we're working on them as a community. And you've got, you know, elected officials like myself, but others who stand with me who are like, no, we're working on this. Like, this is something we came to do, you know? But for the younger generation, it's interesting because now we're having a lot more talk about, okay, we know that's the problem. We've got that problem out there. But like, what are you going to do to take care of yourself? What are we going to do to like start to address that the systemic racism and discrimination and homophobia and all that actually has an impact not only on us as a people, but me as a person, you as a person, you know? And so when you talk about your mental health, like as people of color, we gotta like break the stigma around that, you know? And say like, it's just as important for us to be out there and supporting each other as it is for us to like reach out to a therapist, you know? You know, I actually founded Caring for Denver, which is a mental health and substance use foundation, and it's now the largest one in the state, maybe the country. And we're providing free mental health services to people in Denver. And you know, you can do it on Zoom right now with COVID and everything like that. You know, you can do it at your barbershop. Like we're trying to really get out there and put funding into the community so that we normalize taking care of yourself and not normalize the trauma. You know what I mean? Like the trauma is just okay. Because there's just looking on your feet. I mean, I remember I was talking to Tay and I was like, you know, who's been doing a lot of the protests too. And I was like, before the protest, we were probably doing 4 or 5 Zoom vigils, like in the course of 2 or 3 weeks. Like, what's that about? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not okay. That's not normal. We need to go out there and do something. And then it just like erupted. But we got to take care of ourselves and we got to normalize treatment. And I think even just having these kind of talks in a place like this, where it's like, you're not going to like 4 white walls and sitting on someone's couch, some white person's couch, and trying to talk about your issues. You know what I mean? Like,
of your humanity.
Right. Exactly. You can do it here. You know. So we're trying to work to normalize that.
There's another there's another good resource, Element of Discovery, and and it was like so refreshing to have a Black therapist. Like, you know how. Because I had went to a therapy session before, and I was just like, she was the same age as me, and I was like, honey, this isn't it. I was like, but you know what I mean? So it's like, I think that like Black people, Latino people, like people of color, we'd be more interested in therapy if we knew that when we get there, there'll be something familiar about the person that you are disclosing personal, very, you know, sensitive information to, but also just like gets it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a huge part. You just go there, you're just like, girl, like, I felt this way. Yes, me too. Did you see that? Yes. You know what I mean? It's something so special about that we haven't had access to before. Like with most things, representation matters. So I not only am I a photographer, I work for DPS's Department of Psychs and Social Workers, and so
we have a mental health team at every school, or we should. Some larger schools have like a couple psychs, a couple social workers that serve the whole school. Some of the like underserved schools don't have anybody, or have people there once or twice a week. And I would say a large majority of the people in our department, which is like over 300 people, psychs and social workers, a large majority of them are white. And so, like you said, representation matters because a lot of these kids that are having issues at schools are black and brown, and they don't have that person that they can go up to that can relate to them, that they can trust with the issues that they're having at home, because they didn't grow up the same way, you know? So,
and who can afford it?
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, like, come on, like, you know, I was like, it's like $140 a session or something like that, and like on the low, like, right, like it's like a week. You want me to go a week or multiple times a week, or my insurance can cover 5 sessions. Like I ain't worked through nothing in 5 sessions. I don't know what y'all thinking, you know. So,
and even for people that want to become psychologists that are people of color, we're already behind the ball too, because you know college is already so expensive for us, and it's already harder for us to get accepted into these programs and into these schools. So it's like, how do we break those chains to be able to like let ourselves become part of the solution, you know?
And I think there's this also, like, I think looking at it through this cultural and indigenous healing process, like, what did we do as a people and as a culture when we didn't have access to necessarily this therapist, right? Like, when you think about the indigenous people of this land and the forms and rituals and things that were set up in the community to acknowledge your pain, your suffering, your role in the world, like to, you know, one of the things we're doing in the far northeast is kind of pulling together therapists, but also indigenous healers, as well as artists, to create a container to actually process things that are more aligned to what the praxis is as cultural and indigenous Black people and people of color in this country. Like there's ways of storytelling, ways of unpacking, ways of sharing and coming together to break bread and conversation. Like intuitively, you have pulled together a space where we can talk and process, right? Like that is praxis that comes and is like, I feel like is carried in our DNA. Like, how do Black women create a space for Black joy and Black healing? Like, I came here from an African dance class, and for 3 hours in a park in Green Valley, we dance, we talk, we move, we pray, we do things intergenerationally. So my children, my elders, our elder is 86 and still dances. And so I think about how moving things through the body, like somatic, right, like counseling, but also like unpacking and connecting to, I think, our cultural richness and inheritance is also a form of healing that is ignored in this system. When you look at a white kind of dominated lens, that has no value, right? But when you look at things through this indigenous, African, and person of color lens, that is where all the power is, right? Is in the collective. Who are you in relationship to me? Who are you in Ubuntu? Who are you in our community, right? Whether you are the lawmakers, whether you are the creators and business owners, the healers, the teachers, like that's power in that. But if we always like turn to systems that were really inherently designed to rooted in whiteness, right? Rooted in your capitalistic, what is your value to our economic system? What is your value monetarily? That's in America how we're defined by, right?
Yeah. But I also think you should get paid for it.
Yes, we
you
should.
know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because we do live in a capitalistic society and like no one's paying our bills, right? So it's like, you know, I talk about how much therapists cost, but I want to value that. But I think, you know, we as an elected official and as a government need to step in and value this. And as a society need to step in and value this, right? Yeah. And so when you talk about who we would go to, it'd be the elder in the community. And like, I will go to these elders' homes and be like, how can we help fund you? And they're like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Because I'm like, listen, like half of your house is falling off the back. Like, but you have people come in. So why don't we fix that? You know what I mean? And like, we're not going to make you licensed. We're not going to do whatever. Like you're the point point person for people for so long. Like we'll give you resources, right? But like at the same time, people need to know that having a conversation is okay.
That's so true. And the one thing that when we pulled everyone together and we had 26 providers in the room, and we talked about, well, why haven't you partnered with the district before? None of them had been able to successfully navigate DPS's funding system. So then when we pulled together the funding folks from strategic sourcing and said, well, what is this barrier? Then they were like, well, if y'all maybe pull together RFP, everybody could be under that umbrella, right? So that's like the next step is how do we create it so that people can partner with these healers and these artists and these creatives and do this in a way that they're compensated for their incredible talent and gifts. But that's never been a conversation, right? Like we're in 2020 and this is the first conversation that we're having about this. And that would...
And it's funny because it almost even, from my experience, it even kind of even shows in the protests. Like I feel like, there's times where you go and protests are all over the place and like, all right, who's really, like what groups are really helping the cause? What groups are just here for the hashtag? What groups are doing this? What individuals are doing this? And so it's interesting because it hurts the movement a bit because some are just like, oh, this is a lot of negative, they're doing the march with the police arm in arm and it just seems very fraudulent. And then others are like, okay, I've been in ones where it's very educational. It's, hey, if you're out there, you have a voice, we're giving you the mic to speak. Are we going to the right neighborhoods to make these protests? Like I actually brought it up with a friend one time. I was like, I understand going to the Capitol, but why aren't we hitting like Cherry Creek? We need to hit where the money is, where it's making the people that are right now in that power, make them uncomfortable. Because we went there. We did. We went and marched and
I saw some folks go in front of our DA's house. I was like, all right.
I was there. We were both there. Yeah. And that's what we need to do. And I think it goes with that. Like we need to make people uncomfortable because that's how the message really gonna spread. And getting the right. Who are we getting the right leaders? Cause I've seen it more recently too. Like the last couple of weeks, where the leaders of these different groups are reaching out to each other. Like, all right, we're playing something this day, we're playing this day. So let's make to where everyone could come together and have more people there rather than dividing the protests. And
you said that when I saw you at the Civic Center Park, you were just like, it seems like there's just multiple movements all at once and they're not in cohesion with each other.
Yeah, you have one at the Capitol, one at Civic Center Park, one
we were at the APD headquarters, and that was an issue there that day when they were just like, why aren't you listening to...
Right? Yeah. Two totally different groups organizing in the same site.
Right.
They were talking over each other. Yeah. And the right voices weren't being heard at the start of that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a learning curve, though.
Yeah, it is. I think so, too.
I mean, we're navigating this on the fly, you know what I'm saying? So it's like...
And we're looking to people...
Without the elders,
right.
The elders can't be honest.
I was about to say, I'm looking at Q's feed like, what we got going on today. Yeah. Okay, here we go. I'm looking at Jonathan's things like, okay, here we go. But I am seeing that there's a huge desire amongst like people my age to do all these things. But I was like, we need some of the elders come back through like, okay, this is how you really do it. And this is how... Because the passion and the desire is 100% there, I can tell you that, but we just like need some help.
Like y'all are teaching. I'm not elder. I'm not in my eldership yet, but as I move toward it, but I can't wait to be an elder. I can't wait. But I will say this is that I think young people's passion and their intuitive sense of justice, like I don't think all the time, I know people always talk about we have to teach these young people, we have to do this. I actually think a lot of our young people are closer to their internal stance around justice than sometimes people who might have made a lot of concessions just to kind of arrive at what they thought was like safety for themselves or opportunity for their family. And so I do think it's like, I don't think it's an accident that movements have been led by young people. I think that
the country was started by young people.
Right?
Like
it's my role right now to be in service of and support of and to learn, like to stand in solidarity with young people, right? And to leverage my resources, my skills toward what is it that you are trying to accomplish, right? And like, how can I be of service?
Yeah. I just think though, and I reach out, try to reach out to my elders more frequently though, because like it can be really isolating to be leading these movements. It can be very like emotionally draining, like who's cooking, right? Like, you know, like what are we doing? Take care of ourselves and like recenter. And like sometimes someone's got to tell you what to do. You just want them to just tell you to sit down and be quiet for a minute. Like, you know what I mean?
I believe that. I'm so connected with my inner Nall right now.
Yeah.
I mean, let me translate stuff outside of protest, just simple stuff.
Right. And like be in service of others, like go mow their lawn or go help them with their groceries. You know what I mean? And just hearing the stories and then feeling like, wait, we're doing something. Right? Because with no context, it feels like we're just out there. But like, we're doing something. And so, I don't know, it's pretty amazing to see. I do feel the absence of our elders in this space, you know, collectively. And I know that a lot of them are like saying, well, we're going to step back and watch because this is amazing. And I think that's good, but soon we're going to have to all come back together because we need them. You know?
That's how it's always been. There's always been the tribe, and you have your elders that just kind of guide you. And so it's been interesting. I think, too, it's been great to see, too, just the intersectionality of everything. You know, I've seen every race, every gender, every sexual orientation, all that out there. And I think it's been one of the bright points I've been seeing, especially like, you know, even like, you know, I know he's big, he's a photographer. I kind of more do it just as, I just enjoy it like as a hobby. I know he's the professional, but I know for me, like even just through the lens, I like the different signs and seeing the different, you know, people are coming out, you know, different flags being flown.
I mean, we went to, on Saturday, right before we went to the Elijah McClain press conference, we marched at the ICE facility in Aurora, which was like not far from the site where Elijah was detained. And it was a small group, and it was led by, you know, Latino students from CU. But the people that showed up, I mean, we had Indonesian people, we had people from Iran, we had they're gonna get mad at me, Iran. I said it wrong. Pronounced it. We had black people, we had brown people, we had white people, and we were a small group, but we were marching up and down Peoria, demanding that the kids be freed. You know, that the people in these cages be freed, and it was just beautiful to see that wide spectrum of folks to just come together because we need. It was the Independence Day weekend, but we aren't all free. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. And recognizing that freedom, you know, that liberation requires that we recognize that if you have in any way privilege to lend that support to say, to do this, co-creating it, not to, I think there's that kind of white saviorism where it's like, I will come down to these protests and bring some water bottles and it's about to be solidarity. And it's like, well, actually, we also need you to be in offices making sure that jobs are being funneled toward communities of color, like recruitment, retention, like safe spaces. Like there's levels of work that need to be done everywhere. And I also think, like, even in the midst of this, my eye has been really on how are we also thinking about Black trans women who've been murdered in this, like looking at like the number of deaths and like the just like, are we doing enough also intersectional work to really look at the nuances? Like, I've seen some people unpack nuances in the, like, I had an article I read today just like really unpacking for me Hispanic, like how there were like some artists who in their countries like dyed their hair completely blonde, looked completely white, like capitalized on that, and then came to the United States and were like, here I'm just another white woman. I need to go back and be a Mexican. Like I need to dye my hair dark and then start talking with an accent and then try to get these roles. So that was something I had not even considered, like in thinking about how people are also just, people are going deeper. Like I think the constructs, people are questioning a lot and really producing a lot of deep, rich thought that I am having a lot of gratitude in just being on a learning journey about some things, but also, you know, being a better ally in and of, as a woman of color, to my LGBT, you know, and gender expansive community to say, am I showing up enough, right?
And just like being cool when you get checked on your language, right? Like you just did. Like you're like, oh wait, I gotta get better about that. You know what I mean? Like, because it's always new. I had never heard gender expansive before, and I'm gay. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, okay, now I'm gonna use that language. Like that's, you know, like that actually is so encompassing and so inclusive. Like I'm down, you know, and so it's just like being open. And I'll say, like, I know it's not the same way everywhere, but in Colorado in the protests, I feel like they've made particular spaces for Black queer people, you know, and like I feel safe as a Black queer person out there, and I think that's really beautiful. That's what I've seen that's so beautiful about these protests. Is like we're celebrating everybody, you know, and like when we ask white folks to step back or step up in some cases, they do, you know, but how do we translate that into what you were saying, into like the workplace, right, into the schools? Because man, I ask a white person to step back and they're like lose their minds, you know, like I work for this and this is mine, and then, you know, and it's like, come on, like it's gotta move beyond the protest, or, you know, I shouldn't say beyond, because it's about both. They can actually happen in the same space. I know folks think we can't, like, you know, walk and chew gum at the same time, but we can. But it's like, but we got to translate that into our professional spaces too, into our schools, into everywhere, housing, and just be like, you know, what are you doing to demand racial equality? Because it's not just about getting shot in the back, right? It's also about like where we go to school, our education, our housing, our economic opportunities. You know, like, are you going to step back in the workplace?
You know what allows for that though is strong leadership. Because when people trust in the integrity of their leadership, they're more likely to point out, you know, inequities and stuff like that. And like in my school, my principal is about that life. Unapologetic, 100%. And so then that cultivates, you know, people being able to check each other at the workplace. It just really does. And if you know, like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then she's going to help me either to navigate this conversation, or she's going to give me the tools that I need to see the outcome that I would like, or to foster the learning for this other person and stuff, you know. And I think, because earlier I heard you say, like, you know, my parents we would have these conversations about these things, and it's not new to me. I be feeling that same way too, and I'm recognizing as well as we move towards this that not everybody is accustomed to talking about race. Like for me, it's been a normal conversation forever, and so I'm just like, yeah, and you know what I mean. And so then, though, I engage with some people, and they're kind of like, ugh, like I didn't really want to go that deep, you know. And so, and that's in the workplace too, though. You know what I mean? Where it's like we're in an equity training, and you hearing something that you may not like. You're choosing to I talked about this, opt out and do whatever else, or, you know, kind of lead the conversation. And then that's what leads to some students being disciplined more than others, some students, you know, receiving services they don't need, like we're earlier talking about in special education, like the bias that's even in special ed, you know.
No, I just appreciate all you guys being here, or all of y'all being here. You know, I know.
I know, like y'all are so. You know, I know. I'm like.
I learned something from everyone. I'm like, all right.
You know what I liked about this though is that I felt like everyone here, were informed.
I enjoyed the mental health part of it. Like, I definitely didn't think we were going to cover that. But it's, you know, super important conversation, especially when it comes to like being out of these protests. Just being able to, like, you know, center yourself and recharge and re-energize, because the fight is not going to stop. The struggle is going to continue. You know, there's no real finish line. This is like we're passing it down to the next generation so they can keep fighting for the next generation.
And I know all y'all are doing your piece individually and as a group, and that's why I appreciate y'all coming today. And
we got to champion each other.
Cause it's tried to be silent, fought to be non-violent. I swear to God, I tried it. I try to speak and I fight it, cause I can't breathe. No, I can't breathe. I said I can't breathe. I can't breathe. No, I can't breathe. I said I can't breathe. You black right now. If you white, you black right now.
It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chance. It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
Then you black right now. If you white, then you black right now. If you red, then you black right now. If you yellow, then you black right now. If you black, then you black right now. If you white, then you white right now.